Welcome to UFHL Now! A close-up look at the ultimate fantasy hockey league. The most realistic fantasy gameplay. High stakes. High reward. Here's your host, the owner of Duckman's domination in the UFHL, and the mighty Mallards of the UFAHL, Dean Millard.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of UFHL Now here on the UFSN, Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, your one-stop fantasy sports shop. And this is where you can find out all the great stuff, and there's a lot of it going on within the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. I apologize. Today's show is going to be very basic. It's not going to have as much information as we usually do. Technology. It won today. Let's just call a spade a spade. It gave me the DD, the greatest finishing move ever, followed by the pile driver. Jimmy Superfly Snuka came off the top rope, the sharpshooter, and then the Hogan leg drop. Technology owned me today. So a bunch of stuff crashed and was deleted. So let's just get this show over with and start the weekend, and hopefully we're back to basics, back to the good things next week and not so basic. But again, we are in UFSN. We'd love to hear from you. Hit us up on Twitter at UFS Network or email UFSN at UFFsports.com. If you have a fantasy sports show that you think would look great on the network, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it is, we'd love to chat with you. We're building something really special here, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. You can reach me at whatever time you want to, or anytime on Twitter at Ducks Domination. So, as mentioned, a pretty basic show today, aside from amazing, massive, killer news from Larry Fisher in the Insider. You're going to want to be sitting down, so we're giving you some time now. It is massive, record-breaking news in the UFHL, and it's only going to get bigger and better. That's the amazing thing about this whole platform, is it's getting bigger and better. So huge news from Larry on the Insider. We will get to that very, very shortly. As mentioned, it's a pretty basic show today, so we're just going to look at the top 10 standings and some key off-season dates for you to be aware of. And we'll get to that, all of that, right after this.
You're watching the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, UFSN, your one-stop fantasy shop. Get in touch on Twitter at UFS Network. Email us, UFSN at UFFsports.com.
All right, so as mentioned, a pretty basic show today, and we're going to start with the top 10 standings and some really interesting things going on with these standings. The Ice Vikings, and we're going to talk a little bit about them with Larry, but just shooting away. I can't believe, I was obviously wrong. I thought Red Army was going to go almost wire to wire, and now the Ice Vikings, they could have another good week and have a 100-point lead. We'll see what happens. I don't think Red Army's going down without a fight. But some movement. The Yetis move into the top 5. Rock Republic and the Royals. The Royals dropping into number 7. The Rock at number 6. The Stingrays and Grizzlies, they've kind of been going back and forth at different times, as well as the Gators sneaking in there at number 10. West Coast Express just on the outside looking in when it comes to the 11th spot. And obviously, this doesn't mean anything, the top 10, other than you get your name mentioned on this show, which is a win in and of itself. But we're going to get into some playoff matchups a little bit later on in this show. But it's really interesting how, first the things at the top, which I didn't think there was going to be a lot of movement, has transpired, and some jockeying for position among the top 10. Also, I want to let you know about some key off-season dates. So, there's 16 franchises that are getting ready for the playoffs, and there's a bunch of us that are, there's actually there's 15 franchises getting ready for the playoffs. And then, as you'll find out later, there's a few bidding for that final spot. And the rest of us are looking to next year land. So here's what you should be ready for in the offseason. You could get an early start on your preparations. But 48 hours after the Klein Cup is handed out, your entry fee will be $1,000 and it will be due. Congratulations on everybody voting on that as well. We're really becoming a big person league here by doing that. And it's going to get bigger and bigger and more serious. So your entry fee, $1,000, due 48 hours after the Klein Cup, and that's when the buyout window starts as well. July 17th is the deadline for your protected list to be submitted. 4 days later, the expansion draft begins, and it's held over 2 days. July 24th is the UFHL entry auction. By the way, we will have, we'll be in that bubble, the number one bubble, where you can get Dylan Gunther if you want to, or Owen Power. Our pick will be available if you're willing to pay a fairly hefty price. Just throwing that out there. July 25th is the UFFS futures auction, where the scouts get involved. And July 28th, we begin NHL free agency. And Larry and I will touch on the insider segment about at least one of that free agency, one of those free agency rules, so to speak, coming into play thanks to the voting. Speaking of that, let's get to him right now. Our UFHL insider, Larry Fisher, now.
Time to get the scoop on the UFHL with our insider, Larry Fisher. He's had lines in the water all week long. What will he reel in for us today? Let's dive in and find out what's going on with the UFHL. Now!
Always love getting the big scoop on what's going on in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League here on UFHL Now, as I bring in Larry Fisher, our UFHL insider. And we've had some pretty big moments on this show, but this one I think is going to top them all, Larry. There's been some really, really cool moments, but the details you have in our first story here on UFHL Now is just absolutely awesome.
Big news from the Blizzard, Dean. Like I said, I'm glad to see you're sitting down. I know you're an owner in the UFHL with Duckman's domination, and give the rest of the current owners a second to take a seat. But because this one's a jaw dropper, the Blizzard franchise has been sold. A new record sale, smashing the former record set by the expansion franchise, 10,000 USD auction. But the Blizzard have been sold to David Aid, aka Showtime. He's a crypto investor from the United States, and he's been a big fan of Scorecoin and the platform and UFF Sports, and now he's involved in the UFHL. He's purchased the Blizzard franchise as well as the UFAHL Schooners, the affiliate franchise for the Blizzard, for a combined sale price of, at the time of sale, with Score valued at 63 cents on Wednesday when the sale became official and Score changed hands. The sale price for both franchises was $51,120 USD. Looking at yesterday, at Thursday's high for Score, it went all the way up to 89 cents. And so when you do that conversion, the sale price as of yesterday at yesterday's high at 89 cents was actually 71,200 USD for the Blizzard, UFHL Blizzard franchise and the UFAHL Schooners franchise. And so again, at time of sale, 41,535 for the Blizzard, and that converts to 57,850 USD based on yesterday's high. And for the Schooners, the UFAHL affiliate, time of sale was 9,585. prorated to yesterday's high, would have been valued at $13,350 USD. So this is by far the biggest sale and kind of the new benchmark for UFHL franchises as more people become involved in the platform, and certainly more crypto investors are starting to take notice of what's happening with UFF Sports. The score coin is rising, and the value of franchises in the UFHL is certainly on the rise.
Yeah, and I think it's worth bringing this one back from our live auction. I mean, that's incredible. Incredibly great news for every owner out there. The benchmark used to be 10,000. Now it's probably sitting around, the 51,000 or more. And I know the generals and the corporals are already on Marketplace. Green Army is up there. The generals, 5 million SEO. And as owners, just like as a GM where I need to, I might have the first overall pick or the ability to bid on the first overall pick. I have to find out what the value is and what I might be able to get for those picks if I were to trade them. Maybe you're just a smart GM by doing that. And the same thing with your franchises. I think we're going to see more on the marketplace and more people trying to see what the value of their franchise is, including Duckman's Domination. We want to know what we're worth, and while we might be the 31st team in our league right now, we're definitely in the top 10, if not top 5 of prospects in the UFHL, and that would be valuable looking at the overall team. So we'd be silly not to take a look and throw something up there.
This is great news for all the early adopters, Dean. You look at Dylan Wheaton. He actually purchased the Blizzard franchise in early December. He left the Rock Republic ownership group, took a buyout there, took his chances, and went and purchased the Blizzard franchise for 1,500 Canadian dollars, just over 1,100 USD at that time. As we mentioned, as of yesterday's high, it's over 57,000 USD for that Blizzard sale. So you can see the kind of profit Dylan made, and I'm sure everybody else is super excited. And the good news is, there are a lot of other crypto investors taking notice of UFF Sports, and you can see on Zilstream the amount of money that's coming into the platform and the amount of interest from the crypto world. I know Showtime has some friends that are interested. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to come to this platform to play fantasy sports and to really manage an investment as a fantasy franchise in the weeks and months to come. So I think the early adopters are celebrating, and great to have Showtime in the league. David Aid, it's certainly going to get a warm welcome when he's added to the Telegram groups for all the owners, and everybody will be happy to have Showtime there. But I did reach out to David and got a statement, and he said it was a tough negotiation, but at the end of it, I believe both sides came out feeling it was a win-win deal for everyone. He added that he's glad to have Jessica stick around to help out with the GM aspect, as my expertise is in crypto. That said, I'm very competitive, so I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to getting my hands dirty. And again, talking with David just to get to know him a little bit better, he said, besides crypto, which takes up 90% of my free time, I love to exercise because, health is wealth. So again, David Aid is a crypto investor from the United States who's taken notice of the UFF Sports platform, and as well as wanted to get in on the gameplay side, and now owns the Blizzard franchise in the UFHL. So congratulations to both David as well as Jessica with the GM role and selling the UFAHL schooners, and certainly Dylan, and reached out to Dylan as well for a statement. And Dylan said, where do I start? This is an emotional day for me. I have met so many great people on this platform over my time as owner and part owner of UFHL franchises. I started out as part owner of the Rock Republic, again, mentioning that was the 5-man ownership group there that sort of broke off and bought their own franchises, purchased 100% ownership of the Blizzard. Dylan went on to say, I have a busy life at the moment with school and work, but I didn't plan on selling the entire ownership of the Blizzard. I met Showtime last week, and we have been chatting for 4 or 5 days about him joining as an equity investor. Hours before the deal went down, we were really close to finalizing a minority equity deal when I spoke to Jessica about us both selling our entire franchises. She said she'd be willing to sell the schooners if the interested party would sign her to a multi-year contract as GM of the UFHL and UFAHL franchises. At the end of the day, for Dylan, it was a financial decision. He went on to add that I have left the Blizzard franchise in good shape. They are struggling this year, but that is to be expected during a rebuild. The protected list and young roster players look very good for the long term. And obviously Blizzard is currently in a lottery position, second last in the standings in the UFHL. So you look at their placement in the standings, and players like Travis Konechny and Capo Caco are kind of the current faces of that Blizzard franchise, not necessarily marquee NHL stars at the moment. So the valuation is very good for Dylan. And again, you look at Showtime and going back to the investment side, Dean, if Showtime was part of the private sale last Saturday, he could have purchased a total of 80,000 SEO, which was the combined sale price between the two franchises, at that 10-cent mark, which only would have cost him out of pocket 8,000 USD. So when you look at it that way, maybe Showtime David only paid 8,000 USD. But as of yesterday's high, that was over 70,000 USD transferring to Dylan and Jessica. So the way Score has taken off and the way that these franchise valuations have taken off, I think this is a sign of things to come. I also reached out to Jessica and sort of a last one from Dylan. I asked Dylan sort of what's next for Dylan. He said, I wish Showtime and Jessica the best of luck. For now, I'm going to focus on the investment side of the platform and wait for the next opportunity to open. I'd like to thank the UFF Sports community for everything. I won't be too far away. And then moving on to Jessica's statement, she said, yesterday was a changing moment for me. Although I have mixed emotions that I no longer own a UFAHL franchise, I am now in a role that better suits my interests. Becoming a GM of the UFHL and UFAHL was my goal since joining UFF Sports. I am excited about the amount that I have received for my franchise and plan to continue investing into the platform. Jessica went on to say, I'd like to thank Showtime for the great negotiations and for signing me to a 3-year contract as GM of the Blizzard and Schooners. Myself and Showtime will chat over the weekend and leading into next week on the direction of the franchises. UFHL fans, don't be surprised to see many moves for the Blizzard over the offseason. Expect 30th place to be in the past. Look out Lemieux division. So a great announcement from all three parties. David Aid, the new owner, Dylan Wheaton, the outgoing owner of the Blizzard, and Jessica Stuckey, who the outgoing owner of the Schooners, or former owner of the Schooners now, but the new GM of both the Blizzard and the Schooners. So we're going to get to know Jessica a lot better. I'm sure a lot of people are saying, who's Jessica? And Jessica is actually the girlfriend or wife partner of Kyle Roberts, who is now the majority owner and GM of Rock Republic, a top 10 franchise in the UFHL. So Jessica will be competing with Kyle going forward now in the big league in the UFHL.
That's awesome. I just love how that whole story came together, almost like a last minute switch and sell the whole franchise instead of equity, and great representation in the UFHL. So looking forward to that. You know what I also like, Larry, is the mid-season meetings that we wrapped up recently. I absolutely loved, first of all, the amount of people that were on that call and the voting process that came out of it. There was a lot of good back and forth, not just at the mid-season meeting, but after it in the Telegram chats, and a very I think a great democratic way that we came about for some of the voting things that we had to re-vote on.
Yeah, the turnout was great. The voting results were great too, because all 32 franchises voted, which is a first for the UFHL. We've always had some non-voters, so great to see the participation from all 32 franchises. And like you mentioned, the initial vote on the entry fee was essentially split. Some people, half the league wanted as high as 1,600 USD, half wanted as low as 600 USD, and it was just perfect the way it worked, that everybody sort of agreed to meet in the middle. It was almost a unanimous vote that 1,000 USD would be the entry fee for the 21-22 season for next season, and that is up from 200 USD for the inaugural or the first full season, this 2020-21 season. So you can see the entry fees up ×5, and obviously now we're talking about franchise sales being up a lot more than 5 times. So it's a great step for the UFHL. The other voting that took place was how to do the voting process or procedures going forward, specifically with rule changes. If you want to get rid of plus minus or whatever the case, how much do you need? Just a simple majority, which would be 17 of 32, franchises, or do you need the 2/3 majority, which would be 22 of 32 franchises in favor? And the owners voted, and it was a significant advantage in favor of 2/3. So going forward, for rule change type votes, it will require the 2/3 of expected votes, 22 votes, in order to accommodate a rule change. And then last but not least, free agency. This is the first summer of free agency in the UFHL, and we were determining how that would work, whether you had to declare your free agents prior to NHL free agency, or if you could wait until the player signed and have that 24-hour window, whether to keep the new contract or release the player to a free agent auction. The franchises, again, were quite in favor of you applying, or at least having the option of the 24-hour window, because they can still release their pending free agents as soon as they're done as soon as they're playing. Current contract is done. So at the end of this season, if you have UFAs, you can release them the day after their season's over or the day of. But if you want, you can hang on to them and wait and see what that new contract's going to look like as far as cap hit. The landing spot is so important. The fit, right? Who are they going to? Where are they signing? What's that team going to be like? What's their role going to be like? So you get to evaluate that with a 24-hour window, as well as how that cap hit fits into your overall salary cap structure. So the 24-hour window is what the owners wanted, and takes away a little bit of the suspense, but it also takes away the guessing game as far as free agency. So it's a new way of doing free agency, which is new in general for this offseason for the UFHL, but the owners preferred the 24-hour window, preferred the 2/3 majority vote, and the compromise was made. Everybody pretty much unanimous was happy with the $1,000 USD entry fee for next season.
And so that's basically going to take our prize pool starting close to $40,000, because I think there's 10% that goes from the entry fee to development, and 90% of it goes to the prize pool. So, our prize pool this year was 31,000 and change. It's going to almost start at 40,000 next year, correct?
And there's a $10,000 base carryover from this year's prize pool.
I included
as well.
that. Yeah, I did include that.
Including that, yeah.
Because we would have 32,000 from all the owners,
right,
less the holdback that goes to development, plus that $10,000. That's amazing.
Right. Yeah. So I think, now that you say, I think it is like 38,800 or something like that would be the starting point, and then it's a progressive prize pool. So all your transactions, and again, as we get more people coming in that are the investor side, and people that got Scorecoin at a nice low amount, that Scorecoin's worth a lot more now in USD. So, all of a sudden, a $5,000 player trade or whatever at that valuation was only, $500 or $50 back when SEO was 10 cents. So I think you're going to see some numbers flying around in trades and stuff too, that are going to be real eye openers and really drive that progressive prize pool significantly higher than the 31,000 that it is for 2021, as well as a bunch of new revenue streams coming in. So again, these sales are exciting, and just the amount of growth in the platform since April and into May with the private sale, and now with Scorecoin being available on ZilSwap to the public, and just the amount of people that are buying there. And I think again, with a new owner like Showtime, they come in and they mostly want to be hands off. They're mostly just funding the operating budget and putting staff in place and overseeing the crypto side, right? Managing the money side. But I think you're going to see a lot of that. I think, as we get into tokenizing the franchises, it's going to open the door for a lot more people to get involved that aren't hardcore fantasy gameplay guys that are going to come in and help fund these franchises, and really, but still, like Showtime said, I'm still a competitive guy, even if I don't watch hockey every night, and my focus is on the crypto charts and stuff every night. I'm still going to, back my team, and I want my team and my name to be, I want Showtime at the top of the standings, not the bottom of the standings. So it's going to be really fun to watch and see how this league evolves going forward.
All right, let's get to some on-ice stuff now. And we've talked about trade bait karma in the past, guys that on that trade bait board go off. And, with TJ Oshie, that was certainly the case. And maybe a little bit of heavenly help for him this week as well. We all remember how emotional that scene was with him and his father after they won the Stanley Cup, and his father was suffering from Alzheimer's. So, obviously some heavenly and some nice karma for TJ Oshie this week.
For sure. Unfortunately, his father did pass recently, and so in TJ Oshie's first game back on Wednesday night, he had a hat trick, and like I said, heavenly help, just drawing inspiration. He did that one for his dad, of course, but in the UFHL perspective, last week's show we talked about the Outlaws possibly shopping TJ Oshie in the offseason and putting his name out there on the trade bait board, even though the trade deadline's passed on April 12th. There's still names out there. TJ Oshie's the name we decided to highlight last week. And TJ Oshie comes back, first game back with a hat trick. So just, again, that trade bait board karma, it's kind of a running joke. But for whatever reason, it seems like whoever we talk about as a trade rumor that hasn't happened yet, they sure enough, their next game or within the next week, by the time we meet again for the next UFHL Now episode, that player's put up a big number.
Yeah, it happened with Sam Gagner on waivers, too. Got the Hattie right after he went on waivers as well. And, we do a top 10 on this show. We take a look at things, but it's been so interesting to see what has happened since the trade deadline and what the Ice Vikings are doing. Like, I was wrong. I fully admit, I thought Red Army was going to run the table, and now the Ice Vikings are running away. So tell us about how things have looked since that, mid-April trade deadline that we had.
Yeah, so on Fantrax, Dean, you're able to go on and select standings and then time frame by date. So I did that, and I went back to April 12th, which was the trade deadline, and let's see the standings since April 12th. And there you have it for total fantasy points since the trade deadline. The Ice Vikings at 736, and the Yetis are hot on their tails at 717. And then Rock Republic in third, down at 606. So and you look at Red Army, who was in first place for the vast majority of the season, at 597. So that just shows you in essentially a month time how much the Ice Vikings and the Yetis have really been taking off. More than 140 point difference there, the Ice Vikings, and now they're all of a sudden like 80 points ahead of Red Army and going strong into the final week. But it's really interesting to see the fantasy points since the trade deadline. The Ice Vikings leading the way with Jeff Brown and Brian Smith. They deserve a lot of credit. They joined for the UFHL redraft in July, and they actually got stuck with the last pick. There was 12 franchises participated in the redraft. They picked 12th overall in the first round. They had the last pick. It was a snake draft, so they picked 12th and 13th, but they got stuck with the last pick there, and they managed to pick the perfect roster for the UFHL scoring system. They might have raised some eyebrows by taking a guy like Tom Wilson in the second round, Evander Kane in the third round, but with so many different scoring categories, Kane and Wilson have been big-time MVPs, and with all the attention on Tom Wilson and all the PIMs he's been racking up, has really helped the Ice Vikings. They made only 12 total trades since that redraft in July. You look at Red Army, you look at the Outlaws, some of these franchises have made 50-plus trades. The Ice Vikings have generally stayed the course with the core group that they drafted. They made 12 trades since the UFHL redraft. The big seven, or the names that they acquired, were guys like Brady Tkachuk, Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, Joe Pavelski, Dustin Brown, Semyon Varlamov, and Ryan Strome. So a few Rangers in there, Zibanejad, Kreider, and Strome. And when the Rangers have a big night, it's usually really good news for the Ice Vikings. And then you look at the number two runner there in fantasy points, and we can look at fantasy points per game as well, Dean. When you take a look there at again, look at the Yetis. They're right on the tail of the Ice Vikings since the trade deadline. So since April 12th, the Ice Vikings are averaging 2.7 fantasy points per game, and the Yetis are right behind them at 2.95. So the Yetis are the second best franchise in the UFHL since the trade deadline, more than 100 total points ahead of the third best Rock Republic. And that just goes to show that Scott Lowater's wheeling and dealing has been paying dividends. He was hired late in the game, right around the trade deadline. Scott Lowater, a week before the trade deadline, joined the Yetis with Colin Mills separation there. There was a bit of an incident, a gaffe with Jace Harlock on LTIR, and the Yetis made some people would call it a drastic midseason change to swap out their GM and replace Colin Mills with Scott Lowater. And as we said, Scott Lowater jumped in with both feet, made a ton of blockbuster trades, turned over, the vast majority of the roster outside of obviously the franchise player Connor McDavid. But, parted with guys like Mitch Marner and Artemi Panarin and just built a deeper roster that is producing more without Panarin and Marner than it was with those guys. So by adding that depth, and the Yetis are also looking loaded for a playoff run. So in my opinion, you look at that Yetis roster and they're I don't think they're a sleeper anymore. They've climbed all the way up to 5th place in the standings and would be higher without some forfeited points. They'd be contending for first place, but I think the Yetis have to be taken seriously for the playoffs as one of the real legitimate contenders for the Klein Cup. And if you go to 3rd place on the list of fantasy points, total fantasy points, that's where we've seen Rock Republic. And I think you don't see Rock Republic on the other fantasy points per game. They're 3rd place here on fantasy points per game. They're not in the top 10. Where did Rock Republic go? What happened there? I think the big thing, Dean, is Rock Republic has obviously been maximizing games played. 3rd in total points, but not in top 10 for points per game. That suggests Kyle Roberts is getting more games played per week than the competition by making the most of his 3 call-ups. So he's really got that down to a science, which players play the most games each week and making sure he gets the right guys with the call-ups to get enough total points to be 3rd overall since the trade deadline, but to not be in the top 10 in points per game. So very good work by Kyle Roberts with Rock Republic, but it certainly adds intrigue to the playoffs as well.
Yeah, it's like what we've been talking about for a long time now. Games remaining. That's such a huge thing to get used to. If all you've ever done is played head-to-head fantasy, then you're worried about games played and getting as many in that week to beat your opponent. This is a little bit of a different strategy, and it's going to work for some people. There's not a whole lot left to decide as far as who's making the playoffs, Larry, but there's still a few teams that are knocking on the door, and maybe could there be some jockeying of position possibly?
There could, and certainly the one playoff race that we have to keep an eye on is the Gretzky division, where you look there, you got the Stallions have basically had that 4th and final playoff seed in the Gretzky division wire to wire, but that has tightened up. The Godfathers are within, I believe, 37.3 points, and the Generals have, they were originally the biggest threat to the Stallions. They faded a bit, and now they're coming on strong again, getting back guys like Tyler Seguin and Vladimir Tarasenko and Nico Hischier. So the Generals are starting to close that gap as well at 88.6 points back, but certainly the Stallions are still the front runner, up 37.3 points on the Godfathers, but that's really the only playoff race we have to speak of entering what could be the final week in the UFHL, because the regular season, according to reports, could end 1 week from tonight, next Friday, with NBC already advertising the NHL playoffs will start next Saturday in the U.S. After Friday, next Thursday, the only games remaining in the NHL are North Division Canadian team games, and some of those may be canceled. So the regular season, we could be into the final week of the regular season starting today. The top 4 from each division qualify for the Klein Cup playoffs this season, same as the NHL. 15 playoff spots are already locked up. As we mentioned, only the 4th seed in the Gretzky division remains up for grabs. So when you look at the UFHL playoff matchups, 7 of 8 are seemingly set for the first round. And the reason I say that is when you look at the points difference between these franchises, there's not a lot of room for, there's a good enough separation that it's unlikely with only 1 week or 10 days left in the regular season schedule that much will change here. It's pretty locked in. So unfortunately for whoever gets that 4th seed in the Gretzky division, it's great news. You get a bigger payout for the regular season. The bad news is you draw Red Army in the first round, and although Red Army's been slipping or sliding a little bit in the standings and hasn't been as hot lately as they were for most of the season, that's obviously a tough matchup. You look at the 2-3 seed in the Gretzky division, you got the Grizzlies against the Battlehawks. That's locked in. It won't change. The Lemieux division, again, these matchups are locked in based on fantasy points. The Ice Vikings will be the number 1 seed against the Blades of Steel as the 4th seed. And the Yetis, the 2 seed, against the Stingrays, the 3 seed. And that Lemieux division for me is the most entertaining bracket heading into the playoff draft, heading into the playoffs. Reason being, the Yetis and Stingrays, they're going to face off. That matchup's locked up. They're going to clash in the first round. They were the 2 franchises that pulled off that blockbuster for Mitch Marner. I think that rivalry is going to be ignited there between the Yetis and the Stingrays. And then because the Ice Vikings and the Yetis are the two hottest franchises heading into the playoffs, they would be clash in the second round based on the division brackets. So I think the Lemieux division is the division to really watch. And then you go over to that's the Allen Conference. You go over to the Legends Conference, and you're looking at the Orr division. And again, these matchups are now locked in with the Titans having the 1 seed going up against Strong Island as the 4th seed. Rock Republic, the 2 seed, going up against the Brutes as the 3 seed. And one thing that's interesting there, Dean, is Strong Island is going to be much deeper following the playoff draft. If you look at their regular season roster, there's some holes. They got a guy like Zion Nybeck, who's a junior player in Sweden on their active roster, just because they needed to fill 12 forward spots at one time. So they're going to, Nybeck obviously waiver exempt, even though Carolina's in the playoffs, they'll put him down on the protected list. They're going to be able to open up a few spots there, Strong Island will, prior to the playoffs, and they're going to fill those spots with quality players that are in the NHL playoffs. So Strong Island could be a bit of another one of those sleeper teams. And that Rock Republic Brutes matchup, again, Rock Republic won't be able to maximize games played in the playoffs the way they have in the regular season, simply because there are no call-ups in the playoffs, Dean. You select your 23-man roster, you put forward your initial roster, you fill the other spots among the 23 in the playoff draft, and then that roster is set. There's no lineup editing day to day. There's no daily lineups. You're not bringing guys up from the protected list and dressing them. So with those lineups locked in, I think that gives the Brutes a decent shot to knock off Rock Republic as well, especially with guys like Crosby and a guy like David Krejci, who's always good in the playoffs. So I think that Rock Republic Brutes matchup is going to be more intense and going to be a tough matchup for Rock Republic. And then the Howe division, last but not least, you got, again, these seeds are now locked in based on fantasy points, barring a miracle last week that changes anything. But it's going to be the Outlaws with the 1 seed against the 4th seeded West Coast Express. And the Royals will be the 2 seed versus the Gators. And the significance of the seeding and 1 to 16 in general is the playoff draft. The draft order is the same for every round. So if you're the Ice Vikings and you're going to finish first overall in the regular season, you pick first overall in every round of the playoffs. But when you look at these division matchups, if you're the Royals and you're ahead of the Gators, well, you're going to be picking ahead of the Gators in every round of the playoff draft as well. So getting the higher seed in your division, there is no home ice advantage like there is in the real world, but the home ice advantage is you have a higher pick in the playoff draft in every round, a chance to come out with a stronger roster heading into the playoffs.
Man, that is going to be so exciting just to see the strategy in the playoff draft. And we might be working on something here on UFSN and incorporating UFHL Now about the playoff draft in the UFHL. So keep listening and watching for that, and we'll give you the details as we go. And that's where we're kind of going with insider advice is those final preparations. If you're just starting your preparation for the playoff draft, you're going to be far behind, because we've been telling people about this for a while to start getting your lists ready.
Yeah, we've been giving a lot of tidbits here and there, what to prepare for the playoffs. And there's so much to take in this last week now heading into the playoffs. But certainly you want to keep an eye on the NHL, right? The clinching scenarios, the pending matchups, or many of the NHL matchups are already locked in too. So who's playing who? Who do you think is going to come out of that matchup? Because the way the playoffs work in the UFHL is it mirrors the NHL. So when that first puck drops on the first round, our first round goes right from game 1 right to the end of the final series of round 1, and then it moves to round 2. So the way that works, you want to know which series do you think are going to be longer because you're going to get more games from those players. You want to, or which team do you think is going to go all the way, or which teams are going to be in that final 4 in the NHL, which team out of each 4 divisions. You want to load up on players from your favorite or your team that you think is coming out of each of the 4 division brackets. Or how do you want to do the draft strategy? And certainly you look back to the inaugural Klein Cup champion, the Monarchs, with Ashley Murray at the time as the owner. She took 9 skaters from the Tampa Bay Lightning out of her 23. Almost every round was a Tampa player. She led with Braden Point in the first round. Miro Heiskanen of the Dallas Stars was her second round pick. So her first and second round picks both made it to the Stanley Cup final. And then she added guys like Tyler Johnson and some of these guys that aren't as big a names, but they were part of Tampa's run. Pat Maroon, those guys helped her every round. Every round as other players dropped off her roster because they were eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs, they were out. Those Tampa guys, the importance got that much more. So do you load up on one team, or do you just strictly go best player available from every all 16 teams that made the NHL playoffs and hope that 8 of those 16 advance to the next round? So much strategy on the draft side. But then there's some other things to keep in mind too. No salary cap in the playoffs. So good news for the UFHL owners. You don't need a calculator handy trying to figure out 81.5 million and not go over the cap. In the playoffs in the NHL, there's no salary cap. That's why Nikita Kucherov is coming back for Tampa Bay. There's a sleeper for your playoff draft. Nikita Kucherov's coming back, and who knows how healthy he'll be, having missed the whole season. But you don't have the salary cap, so you can pick all $10 million guys or all $700,000 guys. It doesn't matter. You don't need the calculator handy. Also, one thing that we should note that from last season that we need to update as well is that you don't need to draft a second goalie in the playoff draft. So you have up to a 23-man roster, which would be 12 to 14 forwards, 6 to 8 defensemen, and 2 goaltenders. If you don't want a second goaltender, if you don't want to draft a second goaltender because they're a backup in the NHL and they're unlikely to get any playing time in the playoffs, in your opinion, you can leave that spot open, but you can't use that spot on a skater. So that's the rule. You can go with a 22-man roster and leave your second goalie spot empty, or you can go with a 23-man roster and draft a second goalie, even if they're a backup in the NHL. The reason some franchises may elect to go with the 22-man roster, Dean, is when you get to the payouts, 50% of the payout goes to the franchise, 50% to the player. If you only have 22 players instead of 23, that's a little bit extra money for each player, especially the players that were already on your roster going in. So if you leave the second goalie spot open, you get a little bit extra payout there. And then the last point on playoff prep is this is the week with waivers that if you have a player who's a fourth liner on your roster that you don't think, or a healthy scratch in the NHL, that their team's going to make the NHL playoffs, but you don't think they're going to do much in the playoffs and you don't want them on your roster, now's the time to waive them, or waive them after the final regular season game prior to the playoff draft, so that you open that roster spot to draft another player in the playoff draft. Now, if they're waiver exempt, guys like we mentioned Strong Island having Zion Nybeck, a guy like that, even though Carolina's in the playoffs, he's waiver exempt. You can send him down. Anybody who's cleared waivers, Dean, since April 21st, which means they're waiver exempt for 30 days, which would go past the playoff draft, those players can also be sent to the protected list because they've already cleared waivers, they're waiver exempt. But generally speaking, if you got a guy, I'll just throw one out there, somebody like Laurent Brossoit, backup goalie in Winnipeg, or Eric Comrie, if you don't want those guys on your playoff roster, you would waive them ahead of the playoff draft to free up that spot. But remember, there's 16 non-playoff franchises sitting there with roster spots that they might want to claim those players. So it's risk reward whether or not you waive them. But if you do waive them, you can open up an extra spot for your playoff roster for that playoff draft.
Well, it's just going to be so interesting to see the different strategy. Do you think your roster is fairly good enough that you only have to add 3 or 4 players, depending on what it is, and then you pay out less in the end? Or do you need, it's always, drafter's remorse. You pass on a guy and then you watch him get a hat trick in the first game or something like that. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the different playoff teams, build their franchises, and feel free to grab the few guys from Duckman's Domination. We could always use a few extra bills around here. All right. Speaking of money, the SEO Price Watch. Tell us about how people can follow along with what's going on. What's the best way to make sure you know what is happening?
It is important for anybody involved in the gameplay, scouts especially, because they didn't have a trade deadline. They're still busy, as well as franchise owners going into the offseason and stuff too. But be aware of that USD score to USD price. And right now it is displayed on the UFFS website right in the top middle, so you can't miss it. And that is updating in real time, and it reflects the market fluctuation. So you'll see what it's worth. We've talked about 89 cents, and it can go up and down based on people that are buying and selling Scorecoin on ZilSwap right now, right? Because it's out on the public. So that price does change from time to time. So basically, what you're looking for, or what you're trying to keep an eye on, is if SCO dips down, if that price goes lower, that means it will cost you more score coins per move. At the same time, that's the right time to go on ZilSwap or to buy more score coin, because it's cheaper, obviously. But if that price dips, it actually costs you more score coin per move. If the price rises of score, it costs you less score tokens per move. So, for example, and that might be confusing, but this will explain it. For example, last Saturday, it cost the Scout 200 SCO to register a player when it was 10 cents in the private sale. So at 10 cents, it costs you 200 SCO. As of yesterday, on Thursday, Scouts are registering players for around 25 SCO when the price of score was at 89 cents. So you can tell how much of a difference that makes from 200 SCO to 25 SCO. And the way you sort of play that market is if you buy it when it's cheap and you accumulate more SCO and the price goes up, then obviously you have that nice big bag of SCO already, and you need less of it to make moves as the price goes up. So you'll spend less in SCO and have more for later. And again, I think being that this is a crypto platform, everybody needs to understand that you're playing the market while playing the game. And so if you're only focused on fantasy gameplay and you haven't got in on Scorecoin yet, or you haven't paid attention to the price, you've missed on a big opportunity for the early adopters to be in the pre-private and private sales at those 10-cent entry points, especially with where score is now. Oh, Dean, your mic is muted.
You know what it's almost like is the fact that in the NHL you have like a capologist, right? And UFHL teams might have to have a capologist as well. But you almost have to maybe have, if you're unfamiliar, have a cryptoologist, if that's even a word, but a crypto expert to be able to guide you, saying, hey, we need to pump some money in here and buy some now, or whatever it might be. We all think we're experts at being a GM. We're not experts at the cap, so maybe you'd hire somebody that. Maybe you're not expert at scouting. You hire somebody that. You might have to have a crypto expert on hand as well on these franchises.
I think most will, and I think Showtime's the first one, right? He's in the door. That is his role essentially with Blizzard, is to maximize their valuations on the crypto side as well, and to make sure his investment grows, right? Because he came in at a high number compared to what other franchise owners did, but how can he help push everybody to that next level? So I think having a crypto expert, somebody with expertise in crypto on the staff is very much important. There are the crypto chat on Telegram, as well as the Score Coin chat. So there's two different chats, the Ultimate Crypto chat and the Score Coin chat. Upwards of 500 members in there, and 90% of them aren't part of the gameplay right now. You can certainly put a feeler in there, which Dylan did. That's how Dylan and Showtime connected. So put the word out that you're looking for somebody to help you on the tokenomics side and maximizing your value with Score. And I think there's a lot of people that are interested in that side, and you'll benefit from it in the gameplay when it comes time to bid on players and stuff. You'll be sitting with a bigger bag than you would had you not paid attention to that side of the platform.
Indeed. Great stuff as always. Can't wait for the playoffs to get here, that final stretch, and we'll see what we can cook up for the UFHL playoff draft next week here on UFHL Now. Thanks as always, Larry.
Thanks, Dean. Looking forward to the playoff draft next week.
This is UFHL Now with Dean Millard. Get in the game, where you own the game.
Man, my head is still spinning over that sale price, and it's only going to get bigger and better. And, there's going to be a lot of well-funded teams. You can, just like Jessica did, you can sell your team and work in that you want to be the GM for a while. There's so many different options for people to, bring on equity, as partners. Or just sell outright. And man, it is just so incredibly exciting to be a part of this growing platform. And that's just the gameplay. There is just so much more going on. And obviously, more sports to be added soon. That is going to wrap things up for us. Again, apologize for the basicness of this show, but as I told you that wrestling match earlier, technology took me down. Big thanks to Larry Fisher and the Insider segment. Congratulations to everybody involved in the sale of the Blizzard. It's just so exciting times ahead, as I've seen a few times on Telegram. Have a great weekend, everybody. I look forward to bringing you a special, hopefully, UFHL playoff draft show next week. Larry and I will talk about the details of that depending on when it's held. We hopefully will have a live show for you during the playoff draft. Have yourself a great weekend in fantasy hockey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you again next week.
UFHL Now is produced by DM Productions. To get in touch, head to www.podcastalley.ca.